It's been 3 days since the Taliban captured Kabul and seized control over the dreams of millions of Afghans. The women of Afghanistan fear the worst at this point, a repeat of what they had to endure during the Taliban's previous rule. And as the Taliban return to power in the country, what does the future hold for Afghan women? Before we get to that, I want to take you back in history, precisely 50 years ago. The pictures on your screen are from Kabul in the 1970s. These young women are attending universities and schools. They haven't covered themselves up from head to toe. They are attending parties, going out, living their lives. These pictures offer a glimpse of what life was like in Afghanistan before the Taliban took over, before their brutal life clamped down on women and their freedoms. After 20 years of gains, these freedoms could be lost in days, but the women of the country are not giving up. Over the next 30 minutes, I bring you stories of Afghan women, their struggles, their fight for freedom, and their undying resistance. Joining us live on the broadcast is Nadia Hashmi from Maryland, United States. She is an author and member of Afghan American Foundation and U.S. Afghan Council for Women. Nadia, thank you very much for being here with us. The Taliban have been talking about securing women's rights, but this will be as per their interpretation of the Sharia. No one knows for sure what that means. Do you fear a repeat of what happened during the previous Taliban rule?
You know, it matters less what I fear, matters more what the women and the girls of Afghanistan fear, and frankly, all of Afghanistan. Because what we're seeing so far is evidence that the people of Afghanistan truly do fear what the Taliban regime will mean for them, and particularly for women's rights and the education of girls. We saw in the hours before the Taliban took control of the country that the people in Kabul were even painting over walls that had images of women outside of a beauty salon because they did not want to be targeted by a regime that would, see that as a disgrace and un-Islamic.
What do you make of the assurances that have been laid out by the Taliban during their press conference?
These assurances are really a demonstration of the Taliban's evolution. The Taliban claim that they have changed, that they are evolved. The one area that I would say they have definitely shown progress and an evolution is in their PR game, in their marketing. They have been able to rebrand themselves as a softer, gentler Taliban, despite the fact that in the past years, they have been an insurgency group launching violent attacks across the country and targeting key members of civil society, from journalists to people in government to activists. And this has been ongoing. And that's really brutal, especially disheartening when we hear people say, oh, what a peaceful takeover this was. This was not a peaceful takeover, even if the past few days did not seem as bloody as some people would have expected. That bloodshed has already soaked the ground. It has been ongoing.
Right. Stay with me, Nadia, as we further discuss what might lie ahead for the women of Afghanistan. And we've been talking about what the Taliban have had to say so far. Yesterday, they held their first press briefing after capturing control over the entire country. The first message to the world after seizing control, when asked about women, this is what the Taliban had to say.
They can get education from primary to higher education. That means university. We have announced this policy not once in international conferences like the Moscow conference, here in the Doha conference. Our leaders mentioned this in their speeches. So this is our policy. And we are really working on this in all those areas falling to us. In Afghanistan, there were thousands of schools, girls in schools, universities. They all are operating. To schools to teach, and also the students are going to universities. And even today, you may have seen the anchor of a news channel, a female. She returned to her job.
This is what the Taliban are proposing. Freedoms, but with a caveat. Women are allowed to have rights, but under the Sharia code, the burqa is not compulsory, but the hijab is. They are free to perform any roles, but within the limits of Islamic law. In a sense, a false sense of freedom, one that the Taliban are championing. Nadia, coming back to you, if we just take a step back and talk about the hard-fought gains that the women of Afghanistan have had over the last 20 years and the fears that these gains could be lost in just a matter of days, and the journey that the women of the country have seen over the last few decades.
And that's really what is so heartbreaking. You know, when we look at an Afghanistan that is grieving, when we look at a diaspora that is grieving, we're looking at what has been lost. The profound loss is really what is stunning us, that we could lose so much so quickly, because those of us who have been paying attention to what's actually happening in the country have seen that women are involved in all spheres of governance and of business. There were 2,500 women entrepreneurs in the country. There were journalists, there were judges, there were students, there were athletes. We had people compete in the Olympics. And all of that is at grave risk right now. I hear what the Taliban are saying. I hear that these declarations that are being made that they will honor women's rights. But I'm also hearing reports from within the country that in certain places that women were being turned away from the university when they showed up, and that women were being turned away from their workplaces when they appeared the day after the Taliban had taken control. So which of these is going to be the reality? The Taliban know that all eyes are on Kabul, that the international community's attention is on Kabul right now. They know that we don't have the bandwidth to pay attention to what's happening in the provinces. They also know that we don't have the bandwidth to continue to pay attention for very long. And so what will happen 3 days from now? What will happen after August 31st? What will happen 2-3 months from now? That's really where we're going to have a test. And that's really where the international community owes it to the women of Afghanistan, to the future of the girls of Afghanistan, to continue to pay attention and have some oversight that the Taliban do honor these promises, these glowing, beautiful promises that they're making, that they are reformed and will respect the rights of women.
Indeed. Nadia, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast with those perspectives. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.